Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, presented by the National Children's Chiefs Commission and the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society. We're just letting people join and we'll get started in 1 or 2 minutes. All right. Good morning or good afternoon for those on the other side of the country. My name is Tracy Levin, and I work with the Our Children Our Way Society, and we've been supporting the work of the National Children's Chiefs Commission over the last year, and we're delighted to provide this webinar today to provide an update on the work toward a plan to end Canada's discrimination in First Nations Child and Family Services. We have Sam Hull from the National Children's Chiefs Commission and Dr. Cindy Blackstock from the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society today, and they'll be presenting for us. But before we dive into that, I'm going to ask Judy to provide an opening prayer for us.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you for all joining across your respective territories and regions for this important webinar for our children and our families. Just say a few words in opening. Cooksjam, Kalkukbi, Great Spirit, we thank you for today. We thank you for the blessings seen and unseen, especially in guiding and directing us in the work for our children and families for the Loving Justice Plan to end Canada's discrimination, which has been ongoing for some time. Our children are struggling. We need your help and guidance. The ancestors with us, the ones that passed on before us, for December 22nd, with nation and racism, and that the children, all the children will receive the loving support and resources that they need at this time, especially any of the children and families, the respective relatives that are not housed right now, that are struggling with mental health and addictions, that need that extra support. Creator, we pray for them. Thank you for our beautiful Mother Earth, and we thank you for the sacred water that runs through her veins, and all our consultant, all our relatives, the plants, the animals, the trees, all that's out there, and we're connected to them, and we are relatives to them through the energy we carry in our body and the ancestral knowledge, Creator. So please keep us safe during this time, and pray that everyone can work together collectively for this important work, and we come together with one heart, one mind, one spirit for our children and our families. Cooksjam, 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 Cooksjam. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Judy. I'm going to pass it to our panelists to introduce themselves. Sam, do you want to start?
Sure, thank you, Tracy. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sam Hull Nitsukasun. I am the Child and Family Services Lead for the Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations out of Alberta. I'm also the technical support for Chief Jacko, one of the commissioners out of Alberta. And today I'm going to be presenting in place of Chief Frost because she is unwell today. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
And Cindy?
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Cindy Blackstock. I'm Gitxsan, and I'm really honored to be joining you from the unceded territory of the Tk'emlúps here in British Columbia. And I really want to begin by thanking Judy for her prayer and to let everyone know that there is a prayer that Judy, along with other knowledge keepers and elders, have provided for the solstice ceremony for children. And we're really hoping that you, as an individual, maybe in your family or your nations, or during your solstice ceremonies, take a moment to join with us in praying for the future of our children for multiple generations. So I just want to acknowledge her for all of that important work.
Thank you. Okay, just to let everyone know, we do have French translation for the webinar today. And if you're looking for that translation, there's a tool at the bottom of your screen to get onto the French channel. And also just to remind our panelists that the translators are working very hard and they appreciate it if we don't speak too quickly. Let's dive into the presentation. We'll start with you, Cindy.
Thank you. And I just want to also thank our translators in making sure that the information that Sam and I will share along with Tracy is accessible to as many people as possible. It is so important that we do that because we have benefited by so many voices in this process, and we want to make sure that we're hearing everyone. So thank you to the translators for making that possible for all of us. I want to disclose that the Caring Society, that's the short form for the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society, that we are a co-complainant in the litigation before the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal in this particular matter. And the aim of this this proceeding is to stop Canada's discrimination permanently against First Nations Child and Family Services, First Nations children in Child and Family Services, and in Jordan's Principle. What Sam and I will be focusing on today is on the First Nations Child and Family Services element. Two things to keep in mind. One is that the discrimination the tribunal found is at the level of the child. So we need to make sure that whatever we're proposing will alleviate that discrimination. The second is that the presentation is really bracketed by what the tribunal can order. There have been a lot of things, important contributions about how child and family services can be improved on a macro scale. We welcome those contributions, but that's actually not something that we can integrate into this next step of our process, which is getting to a plan on December 22nd. Next slide. So when we think about this plan, that we're having to really look at the mandates of how we end Canada's discrimination in child and family services for multiple generations, we look to the direction of leadership. So we have the AFN resolutions, which are all available on the AFN website, and they've been guiding our collective work between the Caring Society and the National Children's Chiefs Commission and the Assembly of First Nations. So those are bedrock pieces for us, along with the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal orders. The CHRT order number 2 that you're seeing in 2016, that was the order where Canada's discrimination was substantiated by the tribunal, and they were legally ordered to stop. I want to really emphasize that this isn't a recommendation. These are legally binding orders that Canada is obligated to follow. And then there's a more recent order, which I will get into along with Sam a little later on, which sets out the minimum standards of how we try to bring this to conclusion so we can safeguard our kids. With the other pieces are, of course, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. They're now 10 years old as of December 5th. And we really want to honor the contributions by the survivors, particularly recommend calls to action number 1 and 3. And then the recommendations, the calls for justice for murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. I should have put on here also the contributions of 60 Scoop survivors and of youth in care. In fact, and youth generally. In fact, one of the reports we just got this morning was from the Assembly of Seven Generations on youth perspectives. So we've been busy integrating that great feedback into the national plan. Next step. So just a refresher on this order. It actually is an order that recites a lot of what the tribunal said before. And it's saying that, look, Canada, you need to bring this in for a landing and stop your discrimination. And Canada has not been really collaborating with the National Children's Chiefs Commission or the Caring Society or AFN recently. So the tribunal said, well, it would be great if you work together on a plan on how to stop Canada's discrimination. But if you don't, then the First Nations parties will work together on a plan, and they'll go out and consult with First Nations leadership, experts, youth in care, knowledge keepers, and others. And they will put forward their plan on the 22nd. And Canada, you're going to have to do the same thing. Now, this plan does not include Jordan's principle, as I said, except for how it overlays with child and family. We know from the history of this case, and sadly, because of Canada's breaching of Jordan's principle orders currently, that we're seeing children come into care because they're denied basic services to keep them safely at home. That's something that we want to stop. We don't want to see any family having to go to child welfare to simply get basic services like medical and health care and education and social supports provided so they can safely care for their kids at home. Next slide. So what are those minimum standards? Well, they're things like the tribunal's order to stop discriminating. I honestly don't know why it's been so hard to get the government to stop discriminating. They're able to do so in so many other areas, and stopping their discrimination towards First Nations children should be a bedrock principle, and they should not be resisting this. I've got the paragraph or numbers in there so that you can go and read it for yourself in the order. The order is available on fnwitness.ca. Also, this idea of multiple generations. Sometimes we're finding Canada would like to just say, well, we want to see all the tribunal orders go away. We don't want to be bound by them as a government anymore. And we'll sign this 5-year agreement with you where we'll take some measures to stop that discrimination. And then we'll figure it out after that. Well, that's actually kind of a risk. Given that Canada has discriminated against our kids, Sam, for like 158 years and beyond that, we need to make sure that they don't do it again. It's the best for kids, it's the best for nations, and it's also best for the economy, everybody. We know from multiple evidence that if you do discrimination, it costs way more than to solve the problem and treat people fairly. It needs to improve on the existing orders and respect the spirit of them. What does that mean? Well, it means like if the order is to stop discrimination, then there might be different ways that you can get there, but the goal has to be respected. It has to be based on the best available evidence, and we're really fortunate here because we, along with, and I want to recognize all the many people who were here before Sam and I were on the scene, who are doing research and contributions on child and family services funding. So, special shout out to the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy, who IFSD they're called, and they've done a lot of research with First Nations to build funding proposals that will hopefully really help us stop this discrimination. It has to be based on the minimum standards of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, UNDRIP, and incorporate regional and First Nations perspectives. The tribunal is aware that there needs to be a national minimum standards, but they're also aware that there's nation and regional differences. And the nations in those regions are best equipped to kind of build upon those minimum standards and say what's needed to address Canada's discrimination. Next slide. So what has Canada done with this? Well, they appealed it. And we're not sure what the grounds are for the appeal. I've tried to read their submission several times, and I can't really make heads or tails out of it to see what they're objecting to. Are they objecting to stopping discrimination for multiple generations? I don't know. I hope not, but we don't know quite yet. The important thing for you to know is that there is no stay of that order, 2025 CHRT 80. So we're all obligated, including Canada, to fulfill it while the federal court takes a look at this particular order and makes a decision. So it's all systems go if and until the federal court decides what it wants to do with Canada's appeal. Next slide. And Sam, is this the one where you take over? It is, and I'm going to turn it over to Sam.
Thank you so much, Cindy. The National Children's Chiefs Commission was mandated to provide strategic direction and oversight of long-term reform negotiations. In September, the Commission received a broader mandate from the First Nations in Assembly to work with the Caring Society in responding to that order that Cindy was just talking about, 2025 CHRT 80. The Commission's technical team worked with the Caring Society to develop an engagement strategy and tools. They developed an engagement guide that was focused on areas of First Nations Child and Family Services that fall within the tribunal's jurisdiction, with CHRT 80 setting the minimum standards for reform. Jordan's principle is being addressed separately, except in the areas where Child and Family Services and Jordan's principle are really tightly linked. Next slide, please. Within each of the regions, the commissioners and their technical advisors supported virtual and in-person engagement sessions. Each region took a slightly different approach, but they were all working from the same document. So to go over a little bit of what those regional approaches were, for example, the Yukon, the Council of the Yukon First Nations convened 2 hybrid meetings to engage with Yukon First Nations chiefs and designated technical staff. On October 7th, an overview of the engagement goals and tools, including an in-depth review of the engagement themes and the questions, was gone over. And it was attended by 15 people in person and 17 virtual participants. And the second one that the Yukon did on November 12th, full engagement session to seek input from the 37 chiefs and their technical staff. British Columbia, in BC, the Our Children Our Way Society facilitated and documented the following engagement sessions. 1 in-person chiefs meeting on November 4th that was attended by 39 chiefs and their proxies. 2 in-person sessions on November 13th, attended by approximately 20 chiefs and frontline staff, and approximately 60 chiefs, counselors, and frontline staff from the Gitxsan Nation. 10 virtual and in-person sessions for Indigenous Child and Family Services agencies, attended by a total of 15 agencies. 1 virtual session for youth, and 1 virtual session for elders and knowledge keepers. An additional 7 First Nations submitted written responses to the engagement questions. In Alberta, where I'm from, treaty-specific engagement sessions were held in Alberta in the Treaty 6, 7, and 8 regions, as designated by the representative nations with support from the NCCC technical advisors. Alberta's NCCC commissioner distributed information to all the chiefs in the Alberta region on September 26th and on October 2nd, notifying them of the upcoming engagements and sharing the engagement tools. Additional information was shared with chiefs at the Assembly of Treaty Chiefs gathering that was October 7th to 9th, during webinars hosted by the Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations on October 22nd and November 4th, and via email on October 24th. In Alberta, 4 in-person engagement sessions were hosted. The Treaty 6 Nations convened a hybrid session on October 30th, attended by 26 chiefs, service delivery experts, and elders. The G4 Treaty 7 Nations hosted an in-person engagement session attended by approximately 30 participants. And one Treaty 6 Nation also led its own in-depth community engagement. And the Treaty 8 Nations also held a hybrid meeting. In Saskatchewan, on October 9th, the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, or FSIN, convened a joint TAG-HSDC meeting attended by 29 First Nation Child and Family Services agencies and Health and Social Development commissioners. FSIN shared the engagement tools and relevant information required to conduct engagements with boards and leadership. FSIN provided feedback based on Youth for Children in Care Forum 2023, Children Welfare Engagement Report from 2024, the AFN Engagement Report, and FSIN's Letter of Response from 2024, and the Saskatchewan First Nations Child Welfare Prevention Program Guidelines, also from 2024. Moving to Manitoba, on October 21st, in partnership with the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs First Nations Family Advocate Office, FNFAO, Manitoba Kiwatanawi Okimakanak Inc., or MKO, and the Southern Chiefs Organization, SCO, a joint letter was sent to First Nations leadership inviting them and their experts to participate in regional engagement sessions on October 23rd, 24th, 28th, 29th, and 30th. MKO and SCO representatives forwarded the invitation to both the Southern First Nations Network of Care and the First Nations of Northern Manitoba Child and Family Services Authority, and their mandated First Nations CFS agencies, which was about 20 of them. A second round of engagement sessions was hosted on November 12th and 13th, and participants from a total of 12 nations attended those engagement sessions. In Quebec, to help facilitate the response for representatives of First Nations in the Quebec region, the First Nations of Quebec and Labrador Health and Social Services Commission organized a regional engagement session followed by a validation session. So on October 29th and 30th, that engagement session with experts and technicians of Child and Family Services took place. And on November 20th in the afternoon, virtual validation session with the chiefs of the Assembly First Nations of Quebec and Labrador took place. A total of 18 First Nation communities, groups, and organizations took part in the consultation as part of the regional roundtable held on October 29th and 30th in Quebec. In New Brunswick, to support First Nations in New Brunswick developing a coordinated response, the NCCC's New Brunswick Commissioner, with support from Mi'kmaq Child and Family Services of New Brunswick, facilitated a regional engagement process involving First Nations Child and Family Services agency leadership, other program directors, and Mi'kmaq political leadership. Throughout October and into November, multiple information and engagement sessions were convened. On October 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th, virtual engagement sessions with all 10 of the FNCFS agency directors and experts in New Brunswick. Directors provided feedback on the NCCC's engagement themes, questions within each of those themes, and reviewed early regional drafts. On October 22nd and 23rd, a two-day Chiefs Symposium was attended by chiefs and proxies from all 15 Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqey First Nation communities. The symposium included education on the NCCC's work, facilitated dialogue on the 9 themes, and validation of the emerging regional draft. Most FNCFS directors also attended. On October 30th, an in-person engagement session with 19 Mi'kmaq community representatives, including health directors, program managers, and technicians, took place. This session was focused more on education around the NCCC's work and, again, validation of the regional draft. On November 10th, a virtual session with chiefs from 5 Wolastoqey communities focused on gathering final feedback and validating the near-final regional draft. And lastly, for Quebec, on November 12th, a final hybrid validation session within the FNCFS directors, once again to review the completed regional submission before it was finalized. And lastly, in PEI, all engagement materials were provided to the First Nations in PEI. Technical experts from MCPEI completed engagement materials and provided updates to the chiefs on the engagement process and identified that further feedback and comments would be welcome and that additional opportunities for engagement would occur following the CHR submission on December 22nd. We posted all the engagement tools on the Commission's website, and submissions could be provided directly through the website. The materials are still available online, even if the engagement for the section is closed, so you're free to access those at any time. In total, over 100 submissions were received. Each submission represented input from individuals or groups of up to 90 chiefs, rights holders, and experts. The group submissions represented individual nations, regional and sub-regional political or technical organizations, or groups of youth and elders. The Commission holds all of this engagement data and has adopted the OCAP principles to safeguard this sensitive and critical information. Next slide, please. As Cindy mentioned, the Caring Society did engaged an academic researcher skilled in qualitative analysis methods to do an analysis of all of this engagement data received from the organizations and the nations. The NCCC technicians have been doing an independent analysis on the feedback received from organizations, nations, and individuals to make sure that the reporting is grounded in the realities of service delivery. This report is not quite complete yet, but we can share some of the highlights of what we heard. So the engagement was structured around 9 different themes. The first theme was purpose, principles, and definitions. These are really just the fundamentals that will guide long-term reform going forward. And in that section, we heard that it's really important that clear and plain language definitions of key terms and principles are really needed. Definitions should be developed in consultation with First Nations and reflect First Nations perspectives. Principles should reflect the interconnected nature of holistic wellness. The social determinants of health and the impacts of CFS programs' discrimination on previous generations needs to be acknowledged and it needs to be addressed. This is identified under the concept of intergenerational equity. How funding is tied to these definitions, especially the colonial definitions, for example, on or off reserve, is a key concern for a lot of people. We were really, we heard a lot that centering culture in the restoration of basic family skills and focusing on cultural revitalization as a path to family wellness is crucial. We also heard that kinship care and traditional adoptions need to be prioritized and funded at the same level as care from strangers. A key phrase that was brought up a lot was nothing about us without us. Major changes require feedback from those impacted, always. The second theme is governance. We heard very clearly that rights holders are central to decision-making regarding children and families, and they must actively participate in FNCFS governance processes. The NCCC is widely supported to play a key role in governance. The structure of the NCCC, i.e. Regionally representative, accountable to communities, focused on child and family well-being, is supported as the main oversight body and to serve as the link between national reform and community realities. We did have one comment that the NCCC's role is complete once their mandate has been fulfilled. And I can't speak for the commissioners, of course, but I suspect that they would agree that a new mandate would probably be required from the nations in assembly for the commission to continue in this work. The third theme is enforcement and durability. We heard very little trust. Actually, we heard no trust that Canada will voluntarily end its discrimination or abide by the tribunal's orders. An enforcement mechanism is necessary. Some suggested mechanisms include tribunal retaining jurisdiction, a dispute resolution process, an ombudsperson, a child and youth advocate, litigation fund. Whatever the enforcement mechanism, it should be legislated, independent, and empowered to make binding orders. The fourth theme was funding. Funding has really been at the center of Canada's discrimination in this case, and it will be the focus of long-term reform. Even now, 8 years after the tribunal ordered Canada to stop discriminating, we heard about so many funding-related challenges in the engagement, related both to funding amounts and also how the funding flows. So a big problem identified is Canada's bureaucratic and constantly shifting funding processes and requirements. These often result in service gaps and operational challenges. There's also a chronic shortfall in capital funding, with extensive delays and ISK-imposed funding caps. Related to capital, there's a huge lack of housing, it's widespread, and it drives our families into contact with Child Protective Services. Population-based funding for prevention does not address unique needs and circumstances. And the splitting of prevention across agencies and First Nations has really disrupted service delivery and has left many nations without time or funding to build the capacity that they need to be able to do these programs. We also heard loud and clear that the nations don't want to have to discriminate against their own people, and that off-reserve members need to be included in funding formulas. Technically, the funding for off-reserve members is outside of the CHRT's mandate under this complaint, but I can tell you that the commissioners haven't given up and they're looking at options to include everybody. The fifth theme is accountability. We heard feedback regarding both Canada's accountability for ending its discrimination in First Nations Child and Family Services, and also the accountability of First Nations and their CFS agencies for prudent management of FNCFS funding. Accountability for Canada must include an end to unilateral decision-making. Full stop. Canada has to be accountable for the outcomes of any policy and any funding decisions. More than that, Canada has to stop making these top-down decisions. We also heard that current reporting requirements are unnecessarily burdensome. These should be replaced with outcomes-based reporting focused on metrics that are relevant to First Nations and on timelines that are applicable to First Nations. The sixth theme is regional variations. And we heard very clearly that regional variations within national long-term reform will be critical. Long-term reform has to address local and regional realities, including geography, population size, specific needs, service availability, existing capacity, and also infrastructure. To negotiate the regional variations, the First Nations will need legal, financial, and policy support. The next theme was the reform of Indigenous Services Canada, or ISC. The old mindset that created and sustains systemic discrimination remains intact, as evidenced in ISC's top-down approaches that disregard First Nations expertise and needs. The compliance-based model in which ISC makes unilateral decisions with no accountability for outcomes has to end. Suggestions for reforming the department ranged widely from completely dismantling to implementing statutory oversight of ISC. Regarding research and outcomes data, we heard widespread support for outcomes-based reporting. At the same time, many First Nations lack the capacity to collect meaningful outcome data and really evaluate the impact of First Nations child and family services or inform policy and funding. Participants called for dedicated data and evaluation staff, training and data literacy, regional data systems, and First Nations-led structures that are aligned with the community priorities and, of course, the cultural frameworks that are unique across the regions. Finally, on transitions and readiness, we heard that past funding transitions, including shifts related to prevention funding and recent operations bulletins, have interfered with the planning, capacity building, and the programs and services development. ISC's conduct, including the lack of transparency, the unilateral decision-making, and the extremely short notice of policy changes, and the inconsistent funding allocations, does not support smooth transitions for the nations. Participants called for stable, multi-year, needs-based funding that includes capacity building. The NCCC technical team is still working on cross-referencing all of the things that we heard with the Caring Society's analysis as well, but moving forward, we'll be able to provide more of an update on that. Next slide, please. I believe that's back to you, Cindy. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Sam, for just a terrific summary of the rich volume of the data that is coming in. And I just want to reassure everyone, we're not done yet. We're still looking at that, and we'll look at it after the 22nd as a real sacred and important source of information to guide our future steps. So we also benefit from some of the research. I'm not going to go through it in detail here, but I just want you to let you know that these are the various places you can go to look at some of the research we will be relying on to inform our plan to make sure that we're doing the best job we can for kids, but we're also entering into the space with humility. We know that no matter what we come up with, there's going to be situations where we have to do course adjustments. And we want to know what those challenges are at the earliest stages. And that's where things like data and accountability and monitoring come in, and make the course correction, because this is not about being right. This is about doing right for kids. Next slide. So highlights of the plan are that it is a first step of a process. There will be more processes before the tribunal. One of the things the Caring Society will be doing is emphasizing that leadership have passed a resolution. I can't remember the number, but maybe Sam and Tracy will. And it says that leadership would like 90 days to look at any kind of final proposal on how to cease Canada's discrimination over multiple generations. And we're going to do our best to really honor this. The real process here is to look at the remedies and the evidence-based approach. You've heard from Sam, a lot of the excellent evidence we have is coming directly from First Nations and their experts. And just to add on to the engagement list, we also funded the Assembly of Seven Generations youth group to do some work summarizing their consultations with youth in care, from care, and other First Nations youth to inform the report. The minimum standards are there. Regional variations are really important. So we would have this national plan that has the minimum standards, but every region is different. And instead of like saying, well, this is what Treaty 6 or Treaty 8 needs, we're really just going to be looking for a process where there's good faith processes to address those distinct circumstances in every one of the regions. There needs to be transparency and accountability. When we're dealing with kids, all of us need to be accountable. And I harken back to our traditional laws, which all had multiple accountabilities when it came to children. No one person held all the power. It was all throughout the community. We're all watching each other and helping each other do the right things on behalf of kids. So this whole thing about being transparent and being accountable is really important. And I would recommend to everyone, you look at the accountability in our lifetime report by A7G, available on a7g.ca, and read what young people are saying about what accountability looks like to them and how it should be defined and approached. This is an ongoing obligation, no time limit for Canada's duty to not discriminate. And I would just note for everyone, we're talking about discrimination against children and child and family services. But we have to be mindful that those children have distinct identities as well. We have children with disabilities. We have children from the LGBTQAI plus community. We want to respect all the diversities that our children come with and make sure that the discrimination stops for them in all forms. And one note is it does not apply to First Nations affected by the Ontario Final Settlement Agreement. Next slide. So what are the next steps? Well, we're going to see Canada's plan on the 22nd. I think many of us are curious to see what it says. And then that will be a public document. Our plan that we're still working on in real time will also be a public document. We're really looking forward to hearing the reflections of First Nations, of their experts, and of young people, and to kind of see how we could even do better than what we've gotten together on our national plan. We're feeling good about it, but better is always possible, and we welcome it. And we also need to see Canada's plan to see where there's areas of synergy and where there may be some areas that we have differences on. And then the tribunal will determine what the next steps are in the process. And but while the tribunal's doing its work, we're going to continue doing our work, aren't we, Sam and Tracy? We're going to continue to look at that engagement stuff. And of course, we want to get some summary tools out to First Nations about that report that Sam mentioned about the summary of the engagements needs to be finished off. So we're going to get that one out. And then also a summary documents on what the plan has and what Canada's plan says. So watch for that coming quite soon. Here's the key date. So in the Tribunal's Order 2025 CHRT 80, the parties, that means the parties to the legal proceeding, which are currently the Caring Society AFN Canada, with the interested parties in Ontario, but they're not playing a role in this proceeding, this part of the proceeding. We have to file monthly reports on what we're up to. So we've got that drafted, and I've got to get busy on that and file that today. And then we also have the collaboration, the national plan filing and Canada's plan filing on the 22nd. You'll be able to see those on fnwitness.ca. As soon as they're filed, they're public documents that you can share widely, and we welcome your views. And then we'll find out what the next steps are in the process from the tribunal. So Sam, I don't know if you have any closing words here on this one.
No, I don't. Go ahead.
Okay. So, just to kind of sum up here, we will be doing another webinar in the new year to kind of share what and hear from you about what do you think about this? You've seen Canada's plan by then, you've seen our plan, and we want to make sure 2026 is a real year of justice for kids. So please do that. We're going to continue that further analysis. And again, I just want to remind you of the opportunity and the importance of spirituality for children. And your way of being able to participate comes this weekend with the solstice ceremony, with the benefit of the prayer for children that has been developed with the leadership of Knowledge Keeper Judy Wilson, and also assisted by co-commissioner Deb Foxcroft. So please do, take a moment to really honor those kids. Legal proceedings can feel so blasé, but we're doing our best to really infuse the spirit, because it really is, that to me is really, really super important in children's well-being and culture. And it also is an acknowledgement of the ancestors who struggled so hard to make sure that we would be here today with this opportunity to make this generation of children's lives better and future generations of children's lives better. And that's it.
We do have a little bit of time remaining. I think we can take a few questions. If I'm just gonna quickly check the chat to see if there are questions already, but any questions from participants, please feel free to type them into the chat. So the one question I can see already, I know the report that Sam spoke of is still a work in progress, but will a summary be shared with those on this call? So we can share, what we can share is the recording of this call, which will be available on the website of Our Children Our Way, as well as on the National Children's Chiefs Commission website. And the report itself is nearing completion, and we'll make that available early in the new year. Just looking through to see if there are other questions.
There's one there, Tracy, about sharing with social work classes. When the plan is filed with the tribunal, it becomes a public document, so that part you can see. And also, I think, I just want to check what I'm about to say with both Sam and Tracy. They can correct me if I'm wrong. But I think our full intent is to make sure that the summary of the rich engagement contributions by First Nations and their leadership and their experts are also provided to the public, and that could be a great learning tool for social workers. I think one of the big takeaways I want people to really have here is we did this engagement collectively with no money, and we did it with no support from Canada. The love for First Nations children fueled all of us to ask more of ourselves and do whatever was necessary to get this done. And huge thanks to all those people who contributed those contributions, because they also didn't have any money, and they were often taking time away from actually other important business to be able to do this. But everybody just got together and got it done. And I think that's a message for all of us, is that we have to overcome some of these barriers. We ourselves cannot wait for funding to do some of these, go out and talk to people and get their best advice and do better ourselves. And, when Canada says, well, we can't go out and talk to First Nations, there are too many of them, I say two things. One is, it's quite literally your job. And second, we showed you how to do it. So you just need to support First Nations and their authorized entities to go out and talk to people, because people have very important things that they want to share.
Thank you, Cindy. There's a question about Indigenous languages and where they're situated in cultural continuity for Indigenous children.
Yeah, it's critical. And actually, one of the things in the youth report, which will also be a public document, is a real emphasis on language. We have the Indigenous Languages Act. Just recommend everybody take a look at that. That's there. And we also have a recognition of the importance of language in the Act respecting First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children, youth, and families. It's certainly something that's top of mind in the Caring Society. And I believe, Sam, you mentioned that came through a lot in the engagement. So I just turn it over to you to just elaborate.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the overwhelming themes across all of the sections of the engagement was the importance of bringing that connection back to culture and to language, and really making sure that we're staying grounded in those things, and we're remembering that that's what we're really fighting for, is the ability to raise our kids in the culture and have the culture be a guiding force for all of us, and returning back to the ways of things before, and honoring the time that has passed and the struggles that our communities have had, of course, but always being able to go back and know that we have culture and we have ceremony and we have language, and that's critical for kids growing up, and really maintaining that connection and feeling like they belong somewhere and feeling strength in that community.
And there's a question in the chat related to that use of culture as a protective factor. And the question is there any work being done with children regarding sound, ironclad identity so that they can deal with discrimination in a manner that protects them from the damaging impact of discrimination?
Well, one of the things in the reason that the Caring Society funded the youth report is that we really want to hear from young people about how to go about that. And I really support the full and proper implementation of Truth and Reconciliation Commission Call to Action, TRC 66 as it's known. And really what it does is it creates real, healthy, effective spaces for young Indigenous youth to be able to share their views and to be part of constructive policy change throughout a whole wide array of areas. I would really like to see Canada step forward and fund Indigenous groups at the local level, at the regional level, and definitely at the national level, so that they can engage in ways that are meaningful to them. But also on the other side, we and Canada need to seriously take into account their advice, because I can tell you, having read the youth report this morning, it's excellent. And I have threaded through every recommendation and I possibly could, because they came up with a few things that we missed.
Some people have made use of the Q&A feature in this webinar, which I've never actually looked at before. So I found a few more questions for us. With everything going on, what are ways to ensure the federal government honors their legal obligations? For example, regarding Jordan's Principle and various settlements in the settlement era.
Yeah, well, all the legal orders for Canada, as well as information sheets on those, including a summary of all the legal orders, is available on fnwitness.ca under our information sheet, so you can look at them there. There was a really important case on Jordan's Principle that was just decided last week. It's the Attorney General of Canada versus Joanne Paulus. We can give you the case site. And in this particular case, it was an elder who is caring for her grandchildren, very healthy, happy family, except for, the girls have severe asthma and the home had serious mold contamination. So a request went into Jordan's Principle to fix the mold because the pediatrician said it was really essential for the children's health. And Canada refused it. And then the elder took them to court, in federal court, and won. And then Canada changed its reasons for the refusal and decided to appeal this thing to the Federal Court of Appeal. Well, the Federal Court of Appeal has upheld the federal court decision in favor of Ms. Paulus. And just for everybody on the call, the Federal Court of Appeal is just the one level below the Supreme Court of Canada. So this decision has a lot of weight. And where it's really important is, some of you may have heard Canada saying, oh, Jordan's Principle is about existing services. Whoops, there's the confetti. But it's not. It's about Canada has an obligation, because the harms it's put on First Nations kids, to actually do more so to give those kids a chance to be able to recover from it. So the Federal Court of Appeal decision really sets that aside. It's a very important decision. So that litigation and political advocacy really works. And we would welcome non-Indigenous organizations to really join forces with us, along with individuals, and write letters to the Prime Minister and demand full implementation of Jordan's Principle. It's the right thing to do for kids, and it's going to save us buckets of money. far better to keep kids in safely in their families and far cheaper than to put them in child welfare care and then have to play a class action out somewhere down the line about their lost childhoods or lost lives.
We have another question about regional agreements. So Canada is reaching out to First Nations and trying to make negotiations by province instead of all together. What are the pros and cons of this approach?
Well, first of all, I'm concerned that Canada is doing that. They should not be doing that on their own. There is a resolution by Chiefs and Assembly who have passed direction. Just this is recent, this was in September of 2024, that there should be a national plan with minimum standards and regional variations on top of that. What we're concerned about is that Canada has historically tried to carve out regional agreements and go below the legal standards of which it needs to deliver services. And that is something we do not want to see. So I would, if you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to Tracy or Sam or myself, and we can have a deeper conversation. But I'm concerned to hear that Canada is shopping this around. I can tell you that our information is that Canada does not have a mandate for regional agreements. So unless that's changed, it's a question of whether even they have a mandate to do such a thing. And the tribunal has made very clear that it supports also this national minimum standards and regional variations. So I'm not sure what they're up to.
What are ways that First Nations culture and language funding can be made available to communities?
Well, one of the ways under Jordan's Principle in Child and Family, we have got this as a center point, both in the feedback and in the drafting of the plan, as key there to support the cultural nature of that kind of service delivery. More broadly, in other aspects of education, that's why I kind of mentioned Jordan's Principle, because Jordan's Principle is actually intended to respond to some of these cultural needs. So it's included in Jordan's Principle that elders and knowledge keepers, for example, can write letters of recommendation to access Jordan's Principle. So culture and language are critical to children's identities, and we feel that it's really important.
Cindy, this is, I think, a question in appreciation of your work. And the question is, how can we contribute to your independent advocacy?
Well, you can make a donation to the Caring Society, but I also really recommend everyone to support the incredible work by the National Children's Chiefs Commission. And I just want to say that, you know, another great way anybody can contribute is actually literally getting onto the email of your member of parliament and calling on them to honor this plan that we're about to file and to call on Canada to fully implement all of the orders of the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal and put this dark chapter behind us. So you don't need any funding to do that. Just if you have to, go knocking on the door of their office, right? They're supposed to be out there. They're supposed to be, you know, welcoming those of us who are out there in the citizenry. So use that citizen action. And if you're able to, make a donation to the National Children's Chiefs Commission or the Caring Society. And thank you for your support.
A question about collaboration. Are communities actively looking towards each other to find or use elements of solutions in Indigenous-led projects?
Absolutely. And in fact, that was one of those projects is this case. It was because First Nations and First Nations child and family service providers joined together across the country and said, look, we have to do something about this for our kids. That's how this case came about. And this is what this case is all about on a go-forward basis. And on a more micro level, you have organizations like Our Children, Our Way, where Tracy works. And we also have many regional organizations, First Nations child and family service providers. They often work in close collaboration with their leadership across the country. And there's a national conference. Everybody needs, actually two of them. Put them in your book. One is Our Children, Our Way. The information's on the Our Children, Our Way website. It happens in the fall generally. And the other one is Loving Justice, which is about supporting the multiple pathways to affirming jurisdiction in child and family services and beyond for kids. And that one is also being held in the fall.
Thanks, Cindy. We're just about out of time, so I'm going to turn to Judy to do a closing prayer for us if she can. I know she's traveling today. Oh, there you are, Judy.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
It's a bit of a background noise there. Yeah, thank you for the amazing presentation. Sam, you rocked it. And Cindy, so much information as always. And the collective work from all the territories and all the home fires came together in a good way. The plan is shaped up. The plan still has a lot of more coming together to do, but that's a good example of how we do the work. I'll just close out now. Cook's Jam, Kilcookbee Creator, we thank you. We thank you for hearing everyone's voice, and we thank you for every blessing, and we thank you for all of the energy, and we thank you for all the consideration and thoughts that came from our respective territorial lands, our regions, and our home fires to make this plan what it is, ending justice, ending discrimination and racism against our children and bringing loving justice to them in a good way, Creator, as our children ought to have those loving environments, the support, and also the quality of life and care, and return home to their families and get the services and programs that they're so needed right now. And we thank you for that, Creator, that we're finding our way. And although there was a lot of challenges to do that everyone did that. They provided their time, they provided all of their sacrifices, and they provided everything that they could to make this happen. And all of the elders, knowledge holders, and all of the youth that participated in a truly open process in our many, many circles on circles that joined together for this work. We thank you, and we join you in the winter solstice prayers on December 21st to join us in acknowledging our children and honoring our children and giving those sweetgrass offerings and prayers to them so that they will unblock the way, the pathway, and open it up for our children for the loving justice. And that the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal will look at the plan and they will give a positive ruling for our First Nations children across the country. So we thank you for that, Creator. Please help the ones that need that help right now, that are struggling in any way or may have lost loved ones or also are feeling disconnected. Please bring them into our circles. Please help them with the support, comfort, and resources that they need at this time, especially guiding us all with the law of love. We thank you so much, Creator. We thank you for Mother Earth, the water, the sacred water, and all of creation, Creator. And bless everyone for their holidays and their time to rejuvenate, restore, and spend time with family and loved ones. We thank you for our ancestors, our guardians, and our knowledge keepers, and the spirit guides, and all those around us, seen and unseen and unheard, and that they come forth and help us on this path, on this journey at this critical time, Creator. Cook's Jam, Cook's Jam, Cook's Jam, Cook's Jam. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. And thank you, Sam. You did an amazing job. And Cindy, as always, we really appreciate your help.